I will introduce Lorenzo. So Lorenzo Sciandra is a technologist for the Sovereign Tech Fund. Previously, he was a senior software engineer at Microsoft and has been a core maintainer of React Native since 2018. He has led significant initiatives and collaborations in the React Native ecosystem and is a passionate advocate for mental health in the tech industry. If you'd like to follow him on social media, his at is KELSET. And then without further ado, here is Lorenzo. I will stop sharing my screen and I'll let you take over.
Hello, can you all hear me? Can you see the slides? All right, perfect. Thank you so much, Michelle, for that introduction. Let's get it started then. Yeah, I mean, as already just announced, I am here today to talk about mental health in tech. She mentioned I am a passionate advocate about it. I've been through a lot and we're going to discuss it a bit. But the thing is that I don't know if you have been living under the rock, but over the last couple of weeks, there was a thing called the Olympics. And at the Olympics, there was like one of the biggest athletes of all time that was very vocal about mental health. And I was like, oh, perfect. My job today is going to be super easy. I can just say, yeah, you know, trust Simone, and that's it. Of course, no, I have more slides, I swear. I don't just have this slide. In case you don't know, actually, Simone Biles, she's an athlete from the US. She's like the most gold medal athlete in the US or the most medalist gymnast of all time. Like she's a very, very strong athlete in her gymnast career. And a few years back at the Tokyo Olympics, she was under heavy pressure and she was just like, you know what, I'm not going to even try to compete. There was an old thing and she was just like very vocal. She was like, you know what, I need to take care of my mental health. She took a break for basically 2 years. She came back to these Olympics and she won 3 golds and 1 silver. So, you know, if you need a, you know, an introduction of like why mental health is important, well, you know, if you take care of your mental health, you can go back to winning gold medals in a couple of years. So, I mean, if that is not the proof, I don't know what it is. And by the way, no, you're not tripping. The color is kind of changing because I tried to use a fancy Keynote template. I think it's fun, but if it bothers you, don't worry. No, there aren't many slides like this. Anyway, Michelle already introduced me. So yes, I'm Lorenzo, I'm a technologist. What this means is that basically in the Sovereign Tech Fund, what I do is apply my years of experience at Microsoft as a React Native maintainer. And before that, to basically help the Sovereign Tech Fund, which is a German entity, to give money to open source projects. So we're trying to solve the sustainability problem, trying to solve the classic problem of, you know, having the digital infrastructure rely on poor open source maintainers that do things in their spare time. And yeah, for the context of this talk also, there's a more important bit to know actually about me, which is that I've been seeing a therapist for over 7 years. And we'll get back to that in more details in a bit. But basically, I've always been very interested in mental health for my personal reasons. I've been struggling with it for a long time. And through therapy, I think I've managed to improve a lot. And now I'm here kind of like trying to convince people that therapy is not scary. Anyway, what we're going to do today, Michelle already kind of introduced it. I'm going to talk a bit about mental health in tech, about my personal experience, about a project that I have called the BuMind, and then I will talk a bit about some personal strategies that work for me to make my mental health better. And after that, we are going to have this open table. We'll see how much time we have once I've stopped blabbering, but basically it's going to be an opportunity not just for you to ask questions to me. Like if you write them now in chat, I'll probably only see them at the end anyway. Also because if I interrupt myself, then it's going to be harder. But basically, that's part is not just going to be like a one-direction conversation. I would really love for people to be able to talk with each other. We are a community made to help and support each other, so let's do that. Anyway, we are ready now to start with the actual topic. Let's start by talking about mental health in tech. And when it comes to mental health in tech, I think there are 2 things to discuss principally. So the first one is actually what we're talking about, and then the why. So let's get started. Let's talk about the what. Like when I talk about mental health, when I talk about burnout, what do I mean? What do we mean? It's actually something that we can clearly define because the World Health Organization has given a clear definition of the burnout. Burnout is literally a result of from chronic workplace stress. And by the way, if this looks a bit like, oh, it's so hard to read, don't worry. There you go. I'm highlighting now the keywords for you. So basically, it comes from chronic workplace stress, which means that you have a lot of stress coming from work that is coming back constantly. Chronic means that it's not just like a big spike of stress and then it goes away. It means it's constantly there. And what this leads to, and this is what defines burnout, is exhaustion, mental distance. You're like, I don't care about what I'm doing today at work. I just show up, do my thing, and then leave. I really don't care. And reduce professional efficacy, like literally takes you longer to do your work. And to put in more blunt words, it sucks. Like when you're in burnout, it really, really sucks. There's one thing though that I wanted to point out, which is, we talk about, or like the WHO definition is very clear about the fact that it's a work thing, and also it comes from stress. The funny thing about stress is that even if you go on like trusty websites like the Psychology Today website, there's a keyword in their definition, which is that stress is necessary for all living systems. So it's not just something that we as humans experience, it's something that many more things experience, but also it's necessary because it's actually a bioproduct of our living body. It's actually important, it's necessary. If you think, especially when we were still hunter-gatherers, stress was the thing that allows us to enter the fight or flight response. So for example, if we were hunting for, I don't know, rabbits, and then a tiger popped out in front of our face, stress is what would allow literally biologically our body to quickly respond to the situation. And in that specific sense, that's what this means. It's necessary for you to live properly. And not just that, it's meant to be something that you experience in little bursts and not constantly. So that's where the chronic word used by the definition comes back in. So in a way, if we had to summarize it, we can basically say that work plus a lot of stress is the definition of burnout. And that a lot of stress is where basically all the complicated things come in. So usually that's something that, it can even come up from your personal experience, from your upbringing, but in general, like a lot of it is literally caused by work. There's a lot of variations of things that can lead to an overburdening amount of stress. So we have things like anxiety, imposter syndrome, overwork, a toxic environment. Like there's a lot that can lead you to burnout, and not two people have the same experience. So what I'm going to do today is actually start from, first talking a bit about like why we need it in tech, or like why we need to talk about it in tech. So the first thing that I want to drop on you is kind of like some numbers, just to show you, like when I talk about burnout in tech, why do we need to talk about it? Is because multiple data sources over the last few years have shown us that it's actually something very widespread. It's not just like me, poor Lorenzo, doing his thing in London. No. It's like 81% of the developers in the iStack Analytics through the experienced burnout in the pandemic. So in the pandemic especially, there was a very high number, but that didn't seem to improve after that, because even in the JetBrains survey in 2023, 73% of developers in the survey report to have experienced burnout, and 73% is basically 3 out of 4 developers. And I was like, oh, well, maybe things are going to get better in 2024, right? The Stack Overflow survey said that only 20% of developers are happy at work. If these numbers don't tell the same story, and then tell, a lot of us feeling stressed, a lot of us not really enjoying what they work on, I don't know what they do. And it's so surprising. It's so hard to imagine why tech as an industry is something that would lead to people feeling that way. After all, we only have a culture where everyone is supposed to hustle and work the entire time and overwork themselves. There's a cult of personality. Like if you're not on Twitter with like 20,000 billion followers, you're no one. If you're not constantly sharing how much your product is doing well, it doesn't count. There's a lot of imposter syndrome, a clear lack of emotional intelligence. I wanted to call out this because it's something that I don't think it's that understood still. And what I mean specifically is that what tends to happen is that especially people that move in positional leadership, they're not being moved in positional leadership because they have the skills. It's because they were software engineers the longest in that company, and they just like, oh, well, this person has been here 5 years. Let's just move them up. And they don't get any training to then be able to manage other people. And that is a domino effect. And then, of course, you have unfinished product, you have imperfect products. And one key thing I wanted to highlight here, which is kind of unique of the world of software engineering, is the fact that you are never done with your work, if you think about it. And let me make a quick example to kind of like prove my point. If you're, a braid maker, you wake up at 4, you do your dough, you do your oven work. I've never made bread, sorry, I don't know it. But basically, once you have your bread done and you sell it in your shop, the moment that loaf of bread is in the hands of your customer, it's done. You don't need to think about it. That loaf of bread is completely done, right? When you're a software engineer, you work on your code, you put your code into, a pipeline, and then it gets delivered into a product. Your product that you give to your customers is never finished. Like, in your mind, a part of like a very, very, hidden part of your brain will always know that there's more things to do. Like, you're never done. You can never like fully rest. There's always something else you need to think about. So in my eyes, all these things are kind of like different parts, different elements that really compound to then kind of like bubble up into these surveys. And, like, these have all been like very like broad statements, very like, oh, in big numbers, these will show up. I actually went back to find one of the developers I follow, talking about cult of personality. But, when you get into the burnout, it actually shows up. Like we were talking about the reduction of productivity earlier. If you have a GitHub history, it's likely that you can see where burnout starts. And like, this is also like a reason why you need to take care of yourself. It will literally burn you down. You will literally work less. You will, feel bad all the time. Anyway, talking about feeling bad all the time, let me share a bit more about my own experience. And I literally just made this slide on purpose, very, very bland, because I didn't want to put it there, because then slides are easy to see. We'll just keep it among ourselves and the people that will see the recording, but no one will actually. It's just a secret between us. Basically, when it comes to my experience, I was in university. Luckily, during my last year of university, I had a couple of friends that, because of their own personal experiences in life, they had to deal with therapy. And so they were like, hey, Lorenzo, by the way, there's this thing I do. I just go to therapy because I've had this experience and this has happened. And that notion kind of like entered my brain and stayed there for a while. Then in 2017, I moved to London. I moved to London after having graduated for a couple of years. I was working. I wanted to, move closer to where my partner was. And I wanted also to move to London because I love London. So I started, being here, having a new life in a different country where I luckily I was already somewhat fluent in English, but, there's always a bit of a ramp up when you move to an actual different country that speaks that language. And then I started working, and because of like chances of life, I was living in a certain part of London, and it took me an hour every day to go to work. So I would wake up at 6, take the metro for an hour, get to the other end of London pretty much, and do my work day, then come back. And we were living with some flatmates. It was like us and another couple, and this other couple was somewhat toxic. So I do work, I do this, I do that, a whole new set of new experiences, like doing taxes in a different place. That's always fun. And then I was like, oh, you know what? I should aim for a better job. I should start doing open source more. So I started doing open source on top of all these things already. And then all of a sudden, it gets to the point where I'm starting to have troubles being a nice person. I start having I start to get more angry. I start to have problems like communicating in a way that wouldn't. And also I'm Italian. So if an Italian gets mad, we put these things out and we start shouting a lot. No, but seriously, I had a couple of like bad episodes. Well, one in particular, after that, I was literally like, okay, I cannot live with the way myself is acting right now. And so that week is when I started going to therapy. And that was when I basically resigned to the fact that I was going through a burnout. I was, overworked, heavily overworked. And part of it was that I did have no idea. I was just like expecting, life to be that way. You're supposed to, especially also because from the background that I came from, like you're kind of supposed to, suffer and just suck it up. So in a way, I don't know if you've already seen this. Hey, does it look familiar? But basically, I kind of ignored what was going on with me. I was like, yeah, this is fine, until I literally burned out. And if you put this into the environment I was describing earlier, it was like a perfect storm. And you know what? I was referring to this first episode in 2017. It took me 3 months more or less to get out of it. So in early 2018, that's where I actually managed to figure out an healthier approach to, work, to open source. We moved into a different house, just the two of us, because it was unsustainable. But that wasn't the end of it. Like, mental health is a journey. And when I was showing you earlier, like the GitHub showing the truth. Well, in 2019, basically, I had almost a second burnout. You can see there around April, I was kind of like, whoop, kind of going down. And then it took me another 3 months to properly get back on track. Like, really, mental health is a journey. It's not like a once and done. Oh, I've been through a burnout, I'm vaccinated from them. It's a long journey. It takes time, and it can happen. It can constantly happen again. Like, even now, 7 years in the future, I'm still sometimes struggling with my mental health. And that's also why, I wanted to be more vocal, be an advocate. Also because I know for a fact that everyone has a different experience. And this is where the BuMind comes in. By the way, don't worry, it's not going to be like, it's not a sponsorship. It's not like I'm not shilling. It's just a personal project that I have. Basically, what I do is talk with other people in tech about their own experience with mental health. And in particular, like literally every episode, I really try to make it about a specific topic. So if there's a specific topic that might interest you, I've just kind of like one-to-one them in this slide. I'm not saying you should watch them. I'm saying it's good. Like, it's literally like a software engineer trying to make this thing. So especially the first 3 to 4 episodes are kind of suck. Then I kind of like, I think, figure out a bit. But basically, everyone has a different experience. There's a lot going on. When I was showing earlier the slide of like, a lot of stress that can come from different things, it literally can be a number of different things. And also everyone has a different experience, which is why I wanted to highlight this, like having different people talk about different things. Because if I asked, I don't know, Jamie, which is the person in the bottom left, about ADHD, he wouldn't be able to talk about it. He doesn't have ADHD, but Kitsa has it. So, everyone has a different experience. And I'm sure, we have, I think I saw like around 20-ish people here. I'm pretty sure every one of us has a different experience with their own mental health. That said, if I have to pick just one for this specific audience, for Frontend Queens, because it's a topic near and dear to Anisha, me, and of course the team at Frontend Queens, it would be the imposter syndrome episode. Especially like Anisha was able to, share with me. She has a lot of experience, as she's very passionate about this topic, about like how imposter syndrome, it's women, people of color, harder. We talk about this specific article a lot in our conversation. If you don't want to watch that, maybe just read this article. It's a bit old, but honestly, all the things that are saying there, they're still quite important, I feel like. And so if you're feeling like imposter syndrome is like, let's say, your white whale in this phase of your career, this article, I think, may help you like find a better balance with it. Awesome. Now, I talked for a bit already. I'm not sure what time is it. Okay, actually, I can see it. Sorry, I actually see it, and we're perfectly on time. I wanted to, close it off, give you not just like a lecture, okay, you should take care of your mental health, but also like try to give you some practical strategies. Of course, these are a curated sublist. I couldn't possibly like just spend the next like 50 minutes talking about this. And also these are things that work for me. Once again, everyone has a different experience. What worked for me may not work for you. And also like practical, because some of them are not really practical. They're more like mindset shifts. And talking about mindset shifts, let's start from there. So I have 3 things that I wanted to share with you that when I heard them, when I started to internalize these concepts, they really helped me. And the first one actually came from a YouTube video, which is that I am more hurt by my expectation of someone than by directions. And when I learned this, it literally unlocked a new feature in my brain. I don't know, like the moment I realized that a lot of how I was feeling was actually caused by myself, or like the expectation I have of someone. So for example, the quickest example that can explain this mindset is you walk down the street, you see your friend walking the other way, you wave, they don't wave back, and then you keep walking. If your expectation is that, hey, they should have waved me, you will feel hurt. You will be like, oh, probably I'm a bad person. Probably, they hate me or something. Maybe they didn't have their glasses. They didn't see you. They just were walking straight, or they had something they were thinking about. But because your expectation was that they were supposed to wave you, it's not like they, walked over, punched in the face, and then went away, and that was the pain you were feeling. No. The pain is like because of your expectation. And when I started to realize that, and like when I was feeling bad about someone behaving in certain ways, starting to ask, okay, is this because of my expectation? That really helped me a lot. And the second one is about procrastination. So procrastination, I think it's one of those things that now it's getting a bit more of a, it's changing how it's marketed. Like more people are more aware that underlying, when you procrastinate, there is an actual reason why you don't want to do something. So being aware that there's a reason, and that, it's something within you that is forcing you to procrastinate, you can play around with it. For example, you can literally start investigating, asking yourself, like, why am I actually procrastinating? Like, oh, okay, it's because of that. Or another thing you can do is like be kind to yourself and be like, okay, I understand that maybe this thing right now is overwhelming. Also, maybe I can use this, like, I don't want to do this to do another thing. So, being more kind to yourself is also like another way of like internalizing this aspect of like procrastination, not being like, oh, I'm just lazy. There's actually a reason behind. And then the third thing is it's okay to say no. This is simple. This is something that I think we're hearing more and more about, which is great. Sometimes you need to have boundaries. Sometimes you need to say to people, you know what, you're actually a toxic person. I don't really want to have to deal with you. Maybe at work, you're being asked to do overwork and you're going to be like, no, I'm actually not going to do it. So setting boundaries is very, very good, not just in the act itself of setting boundaries, but also because that means that you're starting to take care of your well-being and understanding what is good for you and what is bad. So it's okay to say no. Now, I did briefly mention work. I wanted to also go through a few things about work. So the first thing, this is kind of like those TikToks of like, oh, these are the unethical things that you're not supposed to do at work. So the first one is actually, being very cynical. 99% of us, unless there's someone that works at NASA or in some like eye surgery, cyber tech place, no one will die if it takes you a bit longer to complete your task, even if your PM is saying, oh, this needs to be done by Friday. Not really. Like, if you need to take your time and take it slowly because, you're on the edge of burnout, or like you really have something else to deal with, you don't have the energy, realistically, nothing's going to change. Like, just imagine, okay, if I had a fever and I was actually off, would that be impactful? No, most times it doesn't matter. Like, if it takes you a bit longer, it's okay. Maybe they will not agree with you, but I can tell you, like, yeah, it's okay. Don't worry about that. The second thing that helped me live better with my work, especially in the times where things were not great, is to constantly have a task list. And what I mean by that is if you every day like write down the things that you're planning to do, and then you like tick off the ones that you've done, even when you have bad days, at the end of a bad week, you can still look back at the task list and say, hey, you know, I feel like I've done nothing and I felt stuck, but actually I've done these things. And this has a compound effect. Like if instead of looking at it at the end of the week, you look at it at the end of the month, you look at it at the end of the quarter, you look at it when you have your annual review. Being able to have a paper trail, a track that tells you, no, you actually did stuff, even when people make you feel like you're not enough, you're not good. That's very good. It's very helpful to have something that you've done for yourself that will show up in the long run. And then the third one is, again, one of these more like, I'm not sure I'm supposed to tell you, but I can and I should. And in most places right now, at least in London, it's accepted. You should be able to use your sick days, your leave of sickness for mental health days. So if you had a hyper stressful week, if you, for any number of reasons, have, a bad day, maybe you have a depression episode or you have an anxiety attack or whatever, it's valid to take a sick day for that. It's like, there's literally no reason why you should not use it. It's, if your mind is sick, you're literally as impaired as if you were like with a fever. So think about it, use them when you can. When it comes to personal life, again, I really try to make this list as short as possible. So I don't have many things here. The first one is, of course, get a therapist. Like I've said it a number of times already. I'm going to repeat it before the talk is done. Don't worry. But getting a therapist is literally, I was talking with a friend and he put it in a very nice way, which is literally going to the gym for your mind. It's like, you don't need to, break your leg before you start doing physio and going to the gym. You should be going to the gym because it makes you feel healthier. Therapy is the same thing. Even if you don't feel like you're, dealing with any massive episode or like you've just gone through a really rough patch, getting a therapist is still very, very good. It's something that hopefully, financially it's viable for you. There are some charities and other organizations that can support. If that's not an opportunity, I have some links. I'll share them later. But basically, getting a therapist is like a cheat code to get better at life in general. Yeah, another one, this is probably one of the most practical ones. Don't drink coffee in the afternoon. I'm sorry, I know some people like it. I'm Italian, I'm supposed to love it. But literally like caffeine as like, from a chemical perspective, has a really long life before you fully digest it. And that means that if you drink coffee in the afternoon, it's going to be in your system still quite heavily by the time you want to go to sleep, and that will impact your sleep. So don't drink coffee in the afternoon. And then this is, again, a bit more like on the mid-level of practicality, like having a routine is the best counterattack for depression. And this is like literally like when you have a very bad depressive episode and like you actually are diagnosed with depression, this is not going to be enough to help you out. But in general, to deal with bad mental health days, having a routine like, I wake up, I don't know, I do some yoga, I do my coffee, like, and then like, I don't know, after I eat, I clean the place, like these practical small things that you do throughout the day, and then that set pace to the rest of your day really do help when you have a time where you're struggling, because maybe, you will feel like a slog the entire afternoon, but, you're going to have dinner and you're going to wash your plates and you're going to be like, I've washed the plates. That was a good thing. Maybe that will help you get out of the rough patch. The classic example is like people maybe because they have a depressive episode, not making their bed, not cleaning the room for like a week or two. And then when they manage to do that, that is like the snowball effect. From there, they can start to get better. I mentioned sleep. I wanted to spend a moment about sleep because I think sleep is the most important one. And I know there are different things, but like in general, sorry, I had to move a thing. In general, like 8 hours of sleep per night, 7 to 8 is like, just try to get 8 hours of sleep or as close as you can to 8. I know that especially in tech, we have that narrative of like, hackers going through the night and staying waking up and coding until 4 in the morning, drinking Red Bull. That's the most destructive thing you can do to your body. Just don't. Another good thing and a good way to get those 8 hours is make your bedroom a no phone zone. Like that is like, luckily we are super able to make it happen here also, maybe because we have a small place, but like literally not bringing phones in the bedroom is a very good way to ensure that once you're there, you sleep. You're not like gonna stay an hour on TikTok. And talking about getting better sleep, there's also like a bunch of tools. There are many different ones. For example, I have a sleep tracker that I use here because I don't like the wrist things. Getting a better pillow, using a sunlight alarm. Again, you're not going to use your phone for your alarm, so get an actual alarm. The sunlight generating or faking the rising of the sun once, I find that type of alarm, it works very well for me. But basically, there are tools to help you get better sleep. You can go into a whole rabbit hole for those things, and happy to discuss it further. But basically, sleep is very, very important. And, there are many, many, many more things that I could list here. I really try to keep it as small as possible. One thing that I've done is actually put them into the BuMind website, which, by the way, this is like world breaking news. Like, this website is literally gone live an hour ago or something. It's very, very fresh, very, very new. So yeah, these used to be in a separate GitHub repository. Now they live here. You can click the link. I'll share the slides later, but basically there's a lot more, and I'm trying to throw everything there. That said, there's one more thing I wanted to talk about when it comes to practical strategies. Then I swear I'm done with this shopping list of things, which is, of course, dealing with burnout. We wanted to talk about burnout. I did describe a bit burnout. I also wanted to give you some more, practical things about how to deal with one. I've been through a massive one. I dealt with like a second one, but luckily didn't get to the very bottom where then I was like a zombie for 3 months. So this is how I kind of survived my second burnout, and I stopped having them after that. So the first thing is, of course, acknowledging it. In general, whenever I talk with someone in tech, the moment that they realize they're or they start asking themselves, do I have a burnout? Am I in a burnout? Usually the answer is yes, and it's probably already too late. So the sooner you're like, hey, those things that the WHO said, the way I feel right now, I'm probably in burnout, the sooner you accept it and acknowledge I'm in a burnout, the sooner you can get out of it, or the sooner you can start dealing with it. When it comes to dealing with it, my best suggestion is to literally cut off anything that is not strictly necessary. Start saying no. Stop, doing all the meetings. Maybe, the ones that you really know that you're not going to be useful in there. Maybe you can show up, just mute yourself and not even show up in the call, either thing, just and then not even attend it. Try to cut off anything. And it's not just work related, also in your personal life. What you're trying to do is literally trying to save as much of your small energy that you have to kind of rekindle that flame to then get out of it. Literally just cut off anything that is not strictly necessary. And then give yourself time. That's the other thing about burnout. I brought it up a couple of times, even in the GitHub's graphs that you've seen. It's not oh, I have a burnout and next Monday I'm going to be back at work. It takes time. I don't know of anyone that got out of a burnout in less than a month. For me, it's usually 2 to 3 months. And again, giving yourself time, giving yourself space to be hey, it's gonna take time, acknowledging that part as well. That's gonna help you, I hope. Again, everyone has a different experience. Anyway, let's close this bad boy up. The main thing I want you all to take out of me blabbering for the last 30 minutes is just that mentality is important. It's very, very important. Start to take care of it if you haven't. I hope that the second slide with Simon was already enough to convince you. If it didn't, I hope that the other 29 minutes and 30 seconds were enough. And yeah, honestly, if you want an action item, if you want something practical to take out of this, is literally just talk to someone you can trust. Of course, a therapist would be ideal. Also because they are not judgmental. Like you literally pay them to create a safe space where they're not going to judge you for anything. At the same time, maybe you don't have access to them, or you want to talk with someone you're close to. Just make sure that if they're not a professional, like you don't put on your person that you care for, like the person you decide to talk to, the person you trust, don't put them on them the burden of like acting like a therapist. They're not. Don't expect them to, but talk to someone, like reaching out to someone, you know, even vocalizing the things you're going through is a very great first step. And yeah, that was me. Thank you so much for listening. As Michelle mentioned, now, well, of course, like those are all my contacts, the websites and everything. I'm gonna post the slides later on all of them, but you know, you can also reach out to me. I'll probably join also the Slack, so you can reach out to me there as well. You can reach out to me in a number of ways. And now we can move to the open table. Michelle, I guess we can stop the recording now and use the last 50 minutes to just chat or for people to ask questions. I noticed that a bunch of people asked.
Actually, Lorenzo, first, thank you for the amazing session. You share wonderful and valuable tips for our community, but we do have some questions in the chat. So
Okay.
let's first answer them and then we will go to the open table. So the first question is, how can tech professionals distinguish between normal work stress and the onset of burnout?
Well, it kind of goes back to that word of being chronic, right? So if, for example, I'll just move back to the slide so that we don't have the flashy colors. In my opinion, it's literally that element of like, is it recurrent? Is it constantly overburdening? Do I have also normal time? Does it always feel this way? To me, it's kind of like understanding, like if there's some sort of cycle, if it's constantly that stressful. I would say that if you work in a place for over 6 months, you should be able to distinguish between like, you know, nice time when there is not much stress and like high pressure times. And if you're like, no, it's always high pressure time, then maybe you're entering a burnout. And again, it kind of also, if you're asking yourself like, if you're entering a burnout, it also like you need to question your relationship with work. Like, do you feel like jaded? Do you hate everyone you work with? You do not want to do the work? Is your productivity reduced, like compared to maybe where you were working before? Like, also talk with other people. Maybe if you don't feel okay with talking with your manager, if you don't feel okay with talking with your colleagues, maybe talk with your friends that also do this type of work, like they're software engineers as well, they're coders. Like, hey, by the way, is it the same in your company? Like, do you always have your manager screaming at you every Monday for 30 minutes? You know, getting outside perspective is also a good way to kind of like rebalance, like, is my situation normal or not?
Thank you so much.
Lorenzo, we're having one more question. So
Yeah, go for
next
it.
question is, yes, thank you. Do you believe in the rule 3, 2, 1?
In the rule 3, 2, 1.
Yes, the rule 3 hours before bed to not
that
eat.
one. Okay,
yes,
okay. Sorry,
yes,
I was thinking
yes,
about
yes.
work. I was like, okay. Just for everyone's, should we like, Mariya, do you want to kind of like say it for everyone?
Please do share the rule.
So I think it's like 3 hours before bed, stop watching any screen.
I think it's
I don't remember
3
actually.
hours. Yeah, I will help. So 3 hours before bed, you stop eating food. 2 hours before
Okay.
bed, you stop drinking water, and 1 hour, do not use any screen device.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, because I think I've heard it in like a YouTube video from, who was it? Yeah, one of the people I follow, but yes. So I think, yes, it's like the ideal rule. Like ideally, like you want to have an unwind phase at the end of your day, because like if you, I don't know, stay on TikTok for 3 hours straight and then like, okay, now I'm gonna leave my phone here and gonna go straight to bed and I want to start sleeping immediately, that's not gonna work. You should in a certain way, like find your way to ease yourself into a state of like, okay, now I'm having less things around me, less inputs, and give you like at least 30 minutes potentially. Like to me, it's less like 3 to 1. It's more like at least 30 minutes before bed, kind of like detox from everything, like and don't expect to fall asleep immediately. But yeah, I mean, if you can implement the 3 to 1 rule for yourself, go for it. I think it sounds very, very good and very, very smart. For me, it's not really realistic though, because usually like at the end of a work day, I'm kind of like tired, and then I have dinner, and then I wash the dishes, and then I want to play video games. So if I had to implement the 3 to 1 rule, I would either go to sleep very, very late, or, you know, yeah, basically I think it's like a goal. You should have it like as a goal. Oh, okay. This is a nice thing to mention, by the way. It's nice to have goals and like, oh, I would like to implement the 3 to 1 rules every day in my life. The problem is that the first day you fail that, you're going to feel very, very bad and you're not going to do it again. So what you should do is instead create a system. And let's say the mantra goes that you're going to fail at the level of your goals, but you're going to win at the level of your systems. So for example, if you set up your computer to literally switch off at 11 p.m., that will just happen independently from if you want it or not, right? Or like if you want to stop drinking, if you don't keep alcohol in the house, you will not drink alcohol when you're at home. So these are like what I mean by systems. Like you modify your environment around you to basically funnel you in the direction you want to go, and you just like chase a goal, because usually chasing a goal is like, you know, like the reason why everyone like starts the gym in January and by February, like it's only like 20%. It's because people are like, oh, I'm gonna set myself this impossible goal because it's like the goal that I'm supposed to live up to. And then the second that they fail, it's kind of like, you know, Duolingo, like you do have a 50-day streak, you miss a day, the streak is broken, you don't even bother going back. It's because of that, because your body is kind of like, your body doesn't like feeling bad. So they're like, fuck that, I'm not going to do it again. That just makes me feel bad. So yeah, sorry, I went on a ramble, but yeah, 3 to 1, a great idealistic goal, put a system behind it so that it's going to work for you.
I appreciate it. I do wanted to mention a little something that I definitely have to take off the social media or the YouTube, because before bed I start thinking, oh my gosh, new content, did I'm behind? Somebody's ahead of me. I have so much to learn, to catch up. And it's really like a lot of pressure.
Yeah. Yeah, especially I feel that when it comes to coding, there's this category of like tech influencers that, you know, they do create a lot of content. They do play into the algorithm game of like constantly producing new content that needs to be, you know, bombastic and needs to be like, oh, it makes you feel bad, but that plays into the game of the algorithm. And also like if they're trying to sell you something, that's how they're gonna get you to buy it. So it's kind of like a rigged game in that sense. That's, for example, why I don't have any of the microblogging social media apps on my phone. Like I don't have Threads, I don't have Mastodon, I don't have Twitter. And also I have separate accounts for like work stuff and personal stuff. So for example, for Instagram, I do have a personal account that is just like for me to talk with my friends and share what is going on in my life. And I do like have a Calcet account for like the software engineering stuff, for Threads, etc. But like creating a literal separation so that even like in your personal time, you don't see your work feed. So you don't see coding stuff, for example. That can also be a system, for example, you know, like you don't risk. But yes, absolutely. Like sadly, this social media and now, because if you want to be a creator, you need to play into the algorithm game. So you need to create the type of content that plays into that. So yeah, it's toxic, you know, spiral. So it's yeah, they're not good. Social media are not good for you.
I have a question. Do you think the tech industry is becoming more aware of mental health issues, or still there's a long way to go? And on that note, how does one like deal with the stigma of having a mental health issue and having to sort of be open about it in work, or at least, take some time and not,
Totally. Yeah. So two things. Let's start from the first one. Is tech becoming better at mental health? Kind of. I think that, as for many other things that COVID accelerated, like pandemic really made some words like burnout, very common. So there is more awareness in general. Like, some of the stats that I was showing earlier, they were like, okay, 80% of developers through pandemic felt the burnout. Also because software engineering was basically one of the most, in a way, unaffected jobs from the productivity aspect. Like, you could just stay at home and work from your laptop, as maybe you were even doing before pandemic. So it actually, I think there are some studies that shown how basically software engineers worked more during the pandemic. So if before maybe someone was already on the verge of burnout, during the pandemic, where maybe that was the only thing that would keep them going, like the people just overworked themselves. So there is more sensibility, kind of like caused by a traumatic situation, which is not necessarily ideal. I think it got better also in the sense that more companies, at least in the big tech, now do talk openly about, mental health, or like they have, like when I was in Microsoft, we did have like an entire series of benefits around mental health. So there is a bit of more general awareness in the work environment, in general in the industry. I don't know yet if we're at the point where you don't need to feel the stigma anymore. And that kind of leads me to the second part. Honestly, I came from Italy, and from the countryside. So from a small countryside, Christian society. So a lot of elements of that society are not really for mental health. They're not like for people talking about their struggles in general. So honestly, when it comes to work, you can either take the road of like kind of owning what you're going through and be like, you know what, I'm dealing with a really bad case of burnout, and just be open about it. And, honestly, kind of like, I have no expectation on how people will react to that. If you have a manager, you should talk with them first and be like, hey, I'm dealing with this. How should we handle it? Hopefully they're going to be supportive. But even if they're not, you don't really need to justify much. Like when it comes to sick leave, when it comes to taking a break from work, like it's not like you need to offer anyone a justification. Like you're not forced to. You may have to do some paperwork. But honestly, if you're just like, you know what, I'm not feeling good, just leave it very generic. If you feel that you're in a place where you're not really supported, if you were to share that you're struggling with your mental health, just saying you're not feeling good and just taking sick days. I think that's okay. I would hope that if you're in tech, if you're in a startup, if you're in a medium-sized company, at least with your manager, you would be able to talk about it though. If not, it sucks and I'm sorry for you. But also like, you're not your work. Maybe that's the signal that you need to change job if you can. Kind of going back to having boundaries and being able to say no. You can be like, no, this is toxic. Fuck this place. Let's go away. By the way, sorry, I swear a bunch of times during this. I hope that it's not going to make any problem for the recording.
No worries. We do have one question from Kathy. How do you advocate or approach educating your workspace on mental health? She tried telling a coworker that she was feeling burnout, but they thought it was something about fire.
Okay. So honestly, first off, it's not your responsibility. Let's put it very clearly. Like, please be mindful of like not overworking yourself and taking responsibility that you're not supposed to have on yourself. Like, first you need to take care of yourself. Now, when it comes to how you can kind of educate your workplace or like create more awareness, if there are certain communication channels that you can use, kind of like, I don't know, if you have a company Slack with a channel for like news, or where people can share a bit more broadly links or resources, maybe starting from there, starting from, articles or surveys like the one from JetBrains or the one from Stack Overflow, and kind of just say, hey, you know what? I noticed that there in the Stack Overflow survey, only 20% of people like are happy. There are ways you can kind of like nudge people in like, hey, look at that. Isn't that weird? Isn't that common? And also, start sharing more advanced resources or sharing books recommendations, or like what you can do if you have like, if it's more, again, part of like something that you can do in terms of responsibility, maybe it's encouraged to kind of like, I don't know, maybe you have a once a month all hands where someone can present something they're passionate about. You could use that venue to kind of like do a small presentation, a 5-10 minutes presentation to talk about like, hey, this is what burnout is. And, you start from the WHO definition and just like talk about how common it is in the software engineering industry. There are a number of ways. At the end of the day, though, again, like do it only if you are passionate about it and you feel like you have enough energy to deal with that. In other scenarios, it's not your responsibility. It's your managers and their managers and the bosses. So, yeah. Cool. I think we're 1 minute over time. I'm fine with staying a bit longer if you want.
We do have a few more questions. Question is, being an entry-level developer, it's my first job. How do I say no, or rather make my boundaries clear without fearing losing my job or getting a poor rapport with my colleagues?
Yeah, that's a great question. Honestly, it makes a lot of sense. When you're a first job, you're like, oh, I don't know how to deal with these people. I don't want to, create a bad environment. Honestly, I would say rely on your manager. And what I mean by that is being like, hey, we have regular one-to-ones. And if you don't, please set regular one-to-ones with your manager. How about during these one-to-ones, we discuss, like you set the agenda for one of them and be like, hey, I would like to talk about like making sure that my workload makes sense. Also when you're an entry at your first role, it can make sense that you have to learn, what the expectations are. But, starting from there, like set clear expectation with your manager about like what your work is supposed to be, and refer back to that document. Like have those type of things written down somewhere so that, oh yeah, my expected working hours are between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. If someone asks you to work outside those hours, you'll be like, sorry, that's my expected work time. If you have a problem, talk with my manager. Or like your expected workload is, I don't know, to work on one feature ticket at the time, and a PM comes in and drops you 2 more. You can be like, hey, sorry, the expectation, the agreement I have with my manager is to work on just one. Like basically leverage your direct leader, your direct manager, your direct whoever is above you to decide stuff, to create a set of rules and agreements that you both agree on, and use that as, let's say, the boundary setter. Don't just say no to someone out of the blue, but like first create a clear expectation on both parties, and then use that to leverage it with the rest of your company, I would say.
Thank you. I have one question that's connected to that. Is thinking about beginner level. If you could go back and give your younger self an advice, perhaps before that time you had burnout, what advice would you give them? Yeah.
Actually start therapy the first time you start thinking about getting a therapist. Because I actually, again, because I had these friends in uni that did share with me that they were seeing a therapist. I already, when I was still in Turin, when I started working after uni, I was like, should I get a therapist? And like the moment you ask yourself the type of question, you actually should, yes. yes, please get a therapist. Like if I had a therapist already back then, maybe I would have been able to not crash so hard and deal so badly with the first burnout, or like even the events that led to it. So yeah, that would be like the one thing I would go back and just like, therapy is a good thing, just start.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, I would say maybe one final questions and then we let everyone go. We don't keep them too much past the finish point. I don't know if there are more questions. Sorry, I didn't check.
Yeah, we do have a lot of questions in the chat, but
Okay.
probably the last question: what are some early warning signs of burnout? What that tech professionals should be aware of?
Yeah, I mean, this kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier of like, if you start getting very angry or like very detached, very jaded of your work, like, oh, look at that. Oh, another PR that fails. Oh, look at that. I'm so surprised that RCI is constantly red. Oh, that dumbass that set up the backend, nothing that they do ever work. Oh, look at that. They just give me another ticket that doesn't make sense. And now I have to figure out by myself, like what this ticket actually means. Oh, look at that. They give me a feature to work on that doesn't exist or doesn't make sense. Like the more you have those type of thoughts, the more you're like, I really don't want to go back to the office tomorrow. That may have something to do with it, especially if that is connected to also feeling drained. Like you go at work, you get out of work and you're like tired. The only thing you want to go is go back to sleep. And like, if you could, you would just stay in bed the next day and not even go back to work. So if you're feeling those type of things, that's probably an early signal. Well, not even early. It's a pretty big signal.
Thank you, Lorenzo. That was our last questions. We want to say, first of all, thank you for preparing and take away from your time. If anyone wants to follow Lorenzo on his social media and YouTube, please do. He has amazing content. Thank you for everyone joining. We're not going to hold you anymore.